Well, hello, I'm Michel Gravel. I live in Ottawa. I'm a French Canadian. I travel to France regularly since 2003. My area of expertise is the last 100 days of the war, specifically the first British Army's advance from Arras to Cambrai, which went on from August 26, 18 to October 9 is when the Cambrai was actually liberated. It was abandoned by the Germans, had to pull out. And I've written 8 books all about this road. 6 are published, 5 are in French. So this presentation it's inspired by my 3rd book, Nous sommes Français. It's about the Canadians and the liberation of Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And you're going to ask me where it is, where the heck is this town? Well, I'll put it on a map for you soon. And Nous sommes Français means simply we're French, because some French civilians went through to meet the advancing, and it turns out they were Canadians. And I imagine them saying, don't shoot, we're French, And you can see on the cover of the book, there's 2 of the young men, and they've got German gas canisters. They're wearing puttees. I would have hated to have them shot by a Canadian skirmisher, but anyway. But this isn't the book. This is sort of like the number 2 DVD on a DVD set for extra features, if you will. So anyway. Hang on. Now, the book is in French. I tried desperately in England and in Canada to get the English version published. I failed, and I rewrote it. I didn't actually translate it. I rewrote the book, so it's a little different than the French version. I wrote it in English, and I just slapped it on a website called Écourt1918.ca. It's only 40,000 words. It's fully illustrated. I might do an Amazon print book, but I had the manuscript all done, and I said, what am I going to do with it? So it was my first attempt at doing setting up a website, and as you can see, it's kind of got a 1990s charm. But anyway, that's it. So if you want to go read the book in French, and there's a lot of stuff in this book that's not in this talk, and vice versa. So they're like I said, it's like the number 2 DVD on a DVD set. Now, I was very fortunate. I got to meet the ombudsman of the French Republic, Jean-Paul Delevoye. The ombudsman is like the Speaker of the House. Well, in rank, he's like the 3rd politician in France. He was also the mayor of Bapaume. And Bapaume is between the Somme and Arras. If you're familiar with the British sector, it's a famous town. And I asked him to write. I asked some prominent people in Canada to write a preface for me, and they said, "We can't start doing that. If we say yes to you, we'll have to say yes to everybody." And that was the attitude I got. The French don't care what other people think. He wanted to do it, so he wrote a preface. And the preface was so well written, I translated it for you, and I tried to replicate the cadence and the poetic beauty of of his preface, but it falls short, but it's worth reading here. I wish through Michel Gravel's work salute the remarkable events he shares with us, and more broadly, all whose research rescues from obscurity our forgotten history. It's essential to support our local historians, guys like us, he's talking about. In a globalized world that makes economic borders disappear, it's important to enshrine our identity with our local history. Écourt-Saint-Quentin, the first inhabited village liberated. What a symbol for the liberators, but also for France. The brotherhood of these citizens opposed the strength of the occupier, the brave Canadians facing death full of their mission. Ideas transcend all people, their hearts beat in unison. Hope flourished and differences faded before the cause of freedom, its value only measured when it was threatened. Our common suffering unites us, and we, with the Canadians, a common destiny, a common culture. In 1918, there was hope. Let us tread the path of hope and dreams, brotherhood of peoples, and maybe, just maybe, we learn from our history. That wasn't an off-the-shelf cut and paste job. He really meant what he was saying, and he was this could be written any of your work. This would apply, Mike. The spirit is the same.
Thank you.
So part one, a story falls on my lap. I bought a book from a friend of mine, my God, in 2003, 2004. Excuse me. There was a war correspondent, Canadian war correspondent called JFB Livesay. And he was there for the 100 days at the front line. And he wrote this wonderful book called Canada's 100 Days in 1919. So I don't understand why academics shun this book. I don't know if they even know about it. But maybe it's because it's a journalism work. But he gives descriptions of the battlefields that are impeccable. And I've used this book over and over and over again to when on my battlefield visits. But in it, I remember reading probably around 2004. He mentions twice these civilians, and the largest quote is here. He says, Écourt-Saint-Quentin must ever figure in Canadian history as the village where Canadian troops first rescued the unhappy imprisoned French people. Vive les Canadiens, vive les braves Canadiens. It was a glad cry from the heart, soon to grow familiar to our ears, but it was first heard at this village. 46 persons for 4 years held in slavery, hid for several days in one small cellar when the order had gone out for the villagers to be evacuated. Half starved, emaciated, but very happy and voluble, we found them. And I just remembered this. I never thought I would be so intimately connected to this cellar and to the people in this one throwaway paragraph. But in 2009 or 10, this is before you could just download stuff. I bought a series of newsreels from the Imperial War Museum, and I was looking for something specific, but there was a lot more content on the DVD that they mailed me. And then I watched them all. It's a 2-minute DVD, but it actually changed the course of my life. My God, that was those 46 people that I was gobsmacked. And from my bookshelf behind me, I pulled the Livesay book, and where did I read that? This is them. Now, at this point, I don't know where this is being filmed. I have no idea. I assumed Écourt-Saint-Quentin, but I had doubts about that because Écourt would have been on the front line and within shelling range. I found no evidence that those guys went to the French army. I think the war ended before anything like that would have happened. Now, I wish I could hire a French lip reader to see what these guys are saying. Now, these guys are going to turn up in my adventures. And again, you'd think it'd be impossible to figure out where this was filmed. You know, it'd be a 1 in a million to ever figure out where this was filmed, right? But there's clues on the masonry, the ruins. So I made some screenshots, you know, which I'm going to use in my investigation. Part 2, Écourt-Saint-Quentin, the geographic context. This is Arras. And just for my American friends and my Dutch friends, there's Verdun. I just added Verdun today to make it, it's quite a ways from your normal stomping ground. But there were 4 main large cities that were right on the front line, and that was Verdun, Reims, Arras, and Ypres. And so they're the big 4 that were right on the front line but never occupied. So this is where Écourt-Saint-Quentin is. It's not a very good map, but it'll do. There's the city of Arras. This is Vimy Ridge. I normally present this to Canadians, so a lot of my fans would have been to Vimy Ridge, so I'm putting it into geographic context. There's another piece of high ground called Monchy-le-Preux, which is quite famous in the area. This is the Dury Ridge, which will figure in my story, and that's the Arras-Cambrai Road. And this is the road. I've written books about Monchy, Écourt, Dury, all the way towards Cambrai, but I haven't finished yet. I'd need another 10 volumes to get it all done. This is the IGN, Institut Géographique map. They're very accurate maps. There's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And in the neighborhood, we have Dury, which we'll talk about, Rumaucourt, Saudemont, and Récourt. That's the Dury Ridge. I'm going to mention this. It's a little place called Mount Robin that I'm going to refer to. And of less importance is La Sablière, or the Sandpit Hill. Those are the 2 high points between Écourt and the Dury Ridge. And very important to the story is there's a valley that leaves from Écourt-Saint-Quentin between Rumaucourt and Saudemont to point southwest, and they call it a river. It's actually a creek called l'Hirondelle. I think a hirondelle is a swallow, a bird, I think. And that'll be important for the story. So I'm getting to know, and this is called the Becquerel Marsh. And the Becquerel Marsh is famous for fishing because I think they only have like 4 lakes in all of France, and that's one of them. So this is an aerial photo from September 18, either just before or just after the battle. The date is just cut off on the picture, but as you can see, there's Écourt-Saint-Quentin, Saudemont, and Rumaucourt, and the Hirondelle River is here and down in the valley. And you can see the Becquerel Marsh. Écourt-Saint-Quentin in pictures. So this is mostly, this is a picture from the 50s of Écourt-Saint-Quentin. There's a landmark that's important, is the church. The church is virtually identical to what the church would have looked like during the Great War, even though it was damaged. And this complex farm here is called the Abbey, or the Lichevin Farm. Which will figure in our story. Remember, Livesay talked about a cellar. Well, holy crap, I found the cellar. This is what it looked like circa 2010. It looks like this today. This is the main road going through Écourt, and you can see the spire. And this is a postcard pre-war. Typical, you've seen a million of these. You guys have seen a million of these places. And this is the church in pre-war times. It was built about 1865, I believe. There's something going on. The school was next door. Those look like school kids. So maybe it was a feast day or something. But there's the church. I think this is during the Reconstruction because you can see all the brick in the street. This is the main street. I think the church would be behind me, and I'm looking east. And if you go far enough, you come to an intersection and you hit Cemetery Road. This is west, going west from the church. You'll come to an intersection where you can turn left. You can turn left down Cemetery Street. That's the communal cemetery there. And that takes you to the Abbey that we're going to talk about again. And this is the Becquerel Marsh. And in pre-war times, it was used by the French engineers for bridging exercises. Like I said, they don't have a lot of lakes. So it's a hot spot. So I went looking, like I got this newsreel, right? And I got the primary source from the journalist who was there, and he said, Canadians liberated these people. So I went looking, like, was this? It's not in the official history, the official Canadian history. They placed the first liberation of civilians in the middle of October. The British official history puts their first liberation like around the 20th of October. So if this was an actual populated village, September 3rd, 1918, which is the day of the liberation, was very early in the campaign to actually reach a population. But I got lucky. I found l'Illustration, which is the French equivalent of the Illustrated London News, and it gave me more pictures, and it was clearly the same civilians, but here they're taking pictures with some French officials. So this was dated 14 September 1918. So I ordered a copy of this, and I made scans of the images so that I could maybe figure out. It doesn't say anywhere in here in the report where this was, where they were. So that was something to be found. Then the Illustrated London News, September 21, 1918, they were on the cover. You'll see the picture soon enough. There's a picture of the civilians being loaded onto a transport truck, a lorry. So this is a new picture I didn't have. And then I think this is the War Illustrated. Again, my civilians are there. But often in the news reports I did find, and even when I read the war diaries of units that came across them on September 3rd, 1918, they would say they were from Roumecourt or from Cagnicourt. But it just depended what last village they had crossed. And they like here, I think they say they're from Sodemo. Well, I know, I think there was one or two people from Sodemo in the group, but I proved conclusively that on the advance on September 3rd, 1918, that there was only one village with any population, and that was Écourt-Saint-Quentin. These pictures, I'll get better scans of them. And this is another, I hadn't seen this before, but I recognize the civilians. These are two guys that were in the front in a trench somewhere with either a British or Commonwealth soldier. But I said these are the guys from the video. And then this is a French Delivré. I forgot which book this is. This is another French, one of these rags that you would buy. They're basically, these people went to. There was all kinds of war news magazines that sprung up, and here they are again. But why aren't they in the Canadian official history from 1962? Like, obviously they had made a splash for a short, like they were a flash in the pan, but they were a flash nevertheless. And this is Philip Gibbs, September 1918, one of his wires. He was a British correspondent. This I took out of the New York Times. So this story was wired across the world. And he talks about what was going on. Oh, it's September 4th, the day after the liberation. And in his thing, he mentions, hey, we liberated some civilians, which kind of pointed to me that were they the first during the offensive of 1918? Because when we think liberation, we think World War II movies, and GIs and Jeeps going through Paris and there's screaming crowds and stuff like this. But we don't have that image for the Great War. Was this the first time? And you have to read my book. In my book, I do an overview of the whole front and where would it have been possible to have come across civilians. And I said I stand. I will accept correction if somebody finds proof, but I don't think any other populated village was liberated until Écourt-Saint-Quentin in 1918. Then, fortunately, I speak French, so I looked up Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And they have a very dynamic historical society. They publish quarterly this beautiful full-color magazine on the local villages in the area, but it's based out of Écourt-Saint-Quentin, and the guy who runs this is a real crackerjack historian, not interested in the war per se, like a lot of French historians are. He's into social history. You'll see an article about a kid who has a collection of butter molds. Anything culturally related. But when I called, they were just about to issue their, I think it's 2008. Yeah, December 2008 issue. And they featured, it was for the 90th anniversary of the liberation of the village. They talked about being liberated by Canadians in 1918. So now the memory was not alive in the historiography in Canada or Great Britain even, but the story persisted in France. So eventually I went over to talk to them, right? And then I asked about the barn, and then anyway, I'll let the story evolve. So I told my ex-wife, I said, I think I've got a book here, but I have to prove where the pictures and the newsreels were taken. If I don't figure that out, there's not much hook to the book. So I said, you want to go for the weekend to Arras? I got to nose around. And I think I went to Écourt as well to meet the Historical Society. Yeah, actually, I gave a talk at their Historical Society of what I was trying to do. And I know Arras pretty well. I've gone 24 times. And I had read a lot about the medical services and stuff that were in Arras. So anyway, I go off to Arras, and one of the things I'm armed with is a Baedeker's travel book from 1914, just before the war started. So this was the plan of the city in 1914, which is very similar to what it is today, but not 100%. And I knew that the local hospital, the Hôpital Saint-Jean, was here during the war and is there now. That's what it looked like pre-war times, Hôpital Saint-Jean, St. John's Hospital. This is in 14-15. It got shelled, so it was in getting in worse shape. You can see there was some damage here throughout the war, I imagine. It got damaged, but unfortunately, oh, and this is presumably, well, it says it's a convalescent ward in Saint Jean Hospital. The British Army, when they took over the front of Arras, turned it into a military hospital. So, because I'm trying to figure out where the civilians were filmed. I doubted it was in Écourt, but I figured it must be they sent them back to Arras, and they would have had to get a checkup medically. So I thought I'd investigate the hospitals. So that's looking towards downtown, the Hôpital Saint-Jean. But unfortunately, this is what it looks like today. The whole complex was razed to the ground after World War II. There was quite a bit of damage in World War II, 1944, September particularly. And this is the inner courtyard. Well, that's what it looks like today. Like just an archaeologist's nightmare. You got two American-style towers. This was where the Saint-Jean Hospital used to be. So, oh well. I can't find any clues there. So there's the hospital. But behind the hospital, there's a street called Vert Soufflé. Vert Soufflé is like a green whistle or something. It's just an alleyway that's going to be important. Not all was destroyed. And particularly the intersection of Rue Saint-Maurice, St. Maurice Street will become important. But I gave up initially on the Hôpital Saint-Jean, but I knew there was a hospital for walking wounded at the College for Young Girls, Le Collège des Jeunes Filles, run by the Ursuline nuns near the train station. I said, well, it sounds like they were all ambulatory. So maybe they went there. And that's what the college looked like. During the war, it was appropriated by the British, and they certainly in 1918, it was a busy place. So when they advanced towards Cambrai, all the walking wounded would have been processed through here. Canadians and British would have gone through here. But unfortunately, and I'll make you you can see that's the Ursuline Tower, which I'm going to come back to. And I don't have a marker, but on the right you can see the belfry, the famous belfry of Arras. Unfortunately, it got leveled in World War II. This has a much more Republican name. It's not Republican as in your party, Republican as a republic. Name the Lycée Gambetta High School. I mean, the whole thing is just there's nothing left. So this is the Ursuline Tower. This road. If you kept going up this road, you would get to Saint Jean Hospital, and so this is the northeast side of the property, and it survived the war because this is 1919, but they tore it all down. They tore this down. And this is what it looks like today. And there's a modern multiplex building there. So as far as research, this was a disaster. And I had brought with me, I went to the National Archives in Ottawa, and I found some photos, some official photographs. And this particular one matched one of the videos that was done. And this is the one that's still elusive to me. I'm not sure exactly where it was taken, but you see there they are. One thing you'll notice throughout all the pictures, it's always the same soldiers, and it's clearly all the French people, and the buildings are similar. So I assumed there was a blitz of pictures and videos taken all in the same place. Any questions? Oh, okay. Here they are loaded on a lorry. Looks like they're leaving. Had no idea where this was taken. There's a better shot, and you can see there's a cinematographer on the left there. I never found that footage, so they're filming them. I believe they're leaving. This is a side view. This would be a very important picture for me in my research. It's the same day, same soldiers. And this guy appears in a number of photographs. He's there. He's a Canadian soldier, and he's having a good time with visiting with the French. This is my favorite picture, and I found where this was taken, but it was so serendipitous. How that could be anywhere in France? Would you agree, Mike? Like where how could I ever figure that out? I got lucky. So Arras, the search. This is from the illustration. I went to France with, I told you, with my ex to recon. So I made hard copies of these pictures. And then I tried to look at the brick. You see the brick kind of matches in the film and in this still picture. And it's not quite the same, but there's masonry there that might be a clue. Like where, like I'm looking for a needle in a haystack, because there's an awful lot of masonry buildings in Arras, right? So I did it the old-fashioned way. I hoofed it. I was jet lagged, and I walked all over town looking at buildings. And this is a derelict building near the Saint Jean Hospital. It's similar construction, but it wasn't. I was so disappointed. It's not any of the buildings I was looking for. And that, there's other buildings that are close. The one on the right clearly survived the Great War, and it's the kind of building that they were photographed in front, but it's not the right one. So I looked at some more pictures, and if you notice, brick is different. So is this a different building, a different place? So I just hoofed it around. Because look, I didn't find anything the first time. The second time, now I'm looking for different kinds of bricks. And this is just a street view picture. There's tons of these in Arras. Very good condition. You can see the same style of construction. But again, this building wasn't the right one. Talk about old school like research. But all was not lost. These guys, I knew them as their 4th Battalion Canadian Mounted Rifles. And fortunately, we have their war diary. On September 4th, 5th, 6th, 1918, they were 3rd Canadian Division. The battle had died down, and they were going in to relieve the assault. They were going to go relieve, I think, the 4th Canadian Division at the front, the ones that had liberated Écourt-Saint-Quentin, and they were in transit towards the front. And they say our men were billeted in the museum, and the museum was repaired. It still persists. And across the street, it said that this is Rue des Teinturiers, was the headquarters for the battalion. And this is where I get sloppy. I don't take enough notes. The address, I read somewhere, I assumed it was in the war diary, that they gave the address of the headquarters. And years later, when I started doing these presentations, I said, well, where was it from? And it's not in the war diary. So I looked at the brigade diary, didn't find it. Looked at the divisional diary, can't find it. I'm certain I read it because I'm very precise with the address. Because I like to be able to, I like to give sources for like I'm not full of crap. This is the right place, but it's a minor. I'm certain it was the headquarters. It was direct across the street is a green space in the museum. So anyway, that was a tangent. I went here. I stood in front of this place, and I said, maybe those guys, the French must have been billeted nearby if they came across these guys. And on the the newsreel, they say the British liberators. Well, they're actually Canadian, and they weren't the liberators directly. They were just guys in transit to the front, and they got lucky enough to meet these French people, and the French people were quite happy. So this is the Hospital Saint-Jean. That's the museum. This is presumably the headquarters of the 4th Battalion, Canadian Mounted Rifles. And so I'll zoom in for you. I just went around the corner down this alleyway, which is Vers Soufflé, which would change my life. So I just did this. I just went down the street. Who knows? What am I going to find? And it bugs me to this day. It was my ex that found it. This alleyway, like no tourists come here. Nobody goes here. But then she said, look at the white building. Look at the white building. And so let me zoom in for you. Yeah, there's that white building. What about it? And then we pulled out this picture. If you look at that, that was it. I exorcised the demons.
That's impressive. That's impressive, Michel. Michel, sorry, man. Wow. That's really wild.
Pause for dramatic effect. So then all I had to do is look right. So I'm at St. Maurice and Vers Soufflé, and I look right and look what I find. My 2 plane tickets paid off. There's a better picture here, same spot. And I'm on an overpass that didn't exist in 18, but it gives you a good view. Do you see on the right side of that building, it's a cheap red brick. That whole facade was rebuilt after World War II. The facade on the left is 19th century. Thank goodness that some of the building survived, or else, I was praying that there was at least one lintel stone left somewhere that would bring me to where I want to be. And this house here is post-war, post-World War II as well. So that whole Vers Soufflé Street is completely changed. So there's Vers Soufflé Street, and you can tell if you've been to France enough, these look like 40s and 50s construction mostly. The brick on the right here looks a little older. That may have survived. But clearly, a lot of these buildings are 1950s vintage. But if you held it just right, they were on Vers Soufflé Street. This is exactly the right spot. And I showed this to my publisher because he wanted to see the cellar that they hid in. So he came out from Normandy to meet me, and he said, "Oh my God, that's it. It was here." This one I never figured out exactly where. I'm hoping someday we'll find pictures of the ruins that we don't know. It has to be somewhere on Vers Soufflé Street, or maybe inside a courtyard of a high school I'm going to talk about in a minute. It could be this spot, but I can't prove it. But I was satisfied with what I found. But there was more to come. I get home. I look on Google Earth, and this is the corner of Vers Soufflé Street and St. Maurice. Is it St. Maurice or St. Charles? Anyway, that's the intersection where they loaded the civilians on the truck. And I go, "Oh my God, there's an inner courtyard." So I called my friend in France, and he says, "Well, yeah, that's the Lycée Saint. The road is called Saint Maurice, and the high school is called St. Charles, or vice versa." I'd have to look back on my slides. Oddly enough, they used the wrong. They didn't name it after the street. They had, I guess, they have a devotion to a different. But although that's a tangent, I said, "Could you go down there and take a look in there for me?" And I was kicking myself that I wasn't there. And this is the inner courtyard. What this place is, it was an orphanage in 1918, but it had been evacuated because of the war. So it's identical to what it was like in 1918, except they put steel stairs and a gangway and some lockers, but it looks exactly like it did in 1918. And that's exactly the spot this picture was taken. Exactly. And I messed around with hundreds of shots trying to line it up perfectly. And I'm telling you that this is where that was taken. That was taken right here. The film was filmed right here. So I contend, oh, and these guys were filmed in this corner. I didn't line it up correctly, but they were in this corner. So I contend that they were evacuated from Écourt-Saint-Quentin, brought into to Arras. They were billeted in a dormitory, which was presumably an empty orphanage, and the orphanage was right next to the hospital. And I do know they had a sanitary inspection. So you know, it's all circumstantial, but I got to be right. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And look at this.
Michel, question for you. These three Frenchmen, these were obviously, they're young guys. These were obviously guys who had been trapped behind German lines in the occupation.
Yeah. And I think according to what I read, they were afraid to get shot because they were of military age when the Germans pulled out.
Right.
And these three didn't hide. They ran out to meet the invaders because I think they were afraid they were going to get shot.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't. I even find out who they are, and I met their kids. So.
Whoa.
So this is taken in the 1890s when Arras still had its medieval its walls. No, they weren't medieval. You can see the belfry. You're behind the belfry. I like this shot because it shows you the neighborhood. This is the museum. And that's Vers Soufflé Street at St. Charles. The photograph's hard to do because the wall that the kid's sitting on doesn't exist anymore. So now I'm going to explain the Arras front, 14 to 18. And just to put, now Écourt, I gave you a geographic position. Now, where is it in history? Well, you've seen this map. In 1914, October 1st, Germans are reeling from the Marne. We're in the race to the sea. They're rushing north, and they're trying to outflank each other. Well, they came up through a place called Riancourt, and they hang an abrupt left at Vis-en-Artois, which Mike is familiar with, and they went down the Arras-Cambrai Road and fought the 77th Barbeau Division at Monchy-le-Port. It was the first battle of Monchy-le-Port. It changed hands 4 times, I think, during the war. And Barbeau had to fall back onto Tilloy-les-Mouflens, but he prevented Arras from falling. So when they failed, ultimately, the Germans went north again and attacked, took Vimy Ridge. And then it went into Flanders, and then finally the first Battle of Ypres occurred in November 1914. So this is just one day in the war. So Écourt-Saint-Quentin was comfortably well behind the German lines from October 1st, 1914, until it was liberated on September 3rd, 1918. And that's the front line that Arras had to endure up until 1917. It was literally, a frontier town. And there's trench maps. You can see there was all kinds of trenches going towards the front line here. And it stayed, except for there was some fighting in 15, but it stayed static until April of 1917. This is Écourt-Saint-Quentin, the church, during the occupation. This is something you might find interesting, Mike. The village had a picture of these ladies with sweeping, and there's Germans watching them.
Right.
And he said women were conscripted to sweep the street, the main road, because it would hide troop movements. If you marched, you would kick up dust, and the British were looking for signs of movement. So they actually, it's the first time I'd ever heard of that, but this might have been widespread for all the villages that had a population near the front. And this is Clémence Leroy, and I use her memoir liberally in my book, which I don't here. But Clémence Leroy was the school teacher. There was one school teacher in the village, and she wrote down 1, 2, and 3 paragraphs a day from October 14 right till September 1st, 1918. And I think a relative, her grandnephew, he's probably dead now, too bad, but he at great expense, he transcribed it all. This, is it handy? I should have took it out. It's a massive volume, and it's really quite unique because it tells you the goings on in a village occupied by the Germans that was nearby the front. And and now they've named the school after her in 2008. They called it Clémence Leroy. And there was by the end of the war, there was only like 3 kids left, and she was still at her post teaching. So then we get 1917. 1917, famous Battle of Arras. The Canadians are at Vimy Ridge. You've got the British attacking towards Monchy-le-Preux. And they ultimately, by May, the line is where this black line is, that the British had recaptured Monchy-le-Preux, which had been occupied for 2 years. It was a significant, you can see it from everywhere on the battlefield. It's like a 90-meter summit, which on relatively flat land, it's pretty big. So that stayed static for a while. But then you get the March offensives. That's the front line on 21 March it started, the March offensive, 21 March 1918. Am I getting that right? Mm-hmm. I think it was 20. And Arras, as you can see, was real close to the front. And there's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. So we've got the Michael offensive. They're attacking on the Somme, Gough's Fifth Army, British Army. They then attack, in the Lys, and they attacked at the Marne. So, I mean, and this is like a really brief summary of what happened. But in the end, this is the front line you had. And you can see Arras is left in a salient. And the Germans just did not... the Canadians were manning Vimy Ridge. And they were fully expecting... Because the hinge to breaking through to the Channel ports, they needed to take Vimy again. And they just didn't bother with Vimy. And it's a sense of great pride to Canadians that they just didn't dare attack. They tried, and really attacking towards Amiens was a big effort, except, it's just a balloon that they popped. The real strategic position was Arras. But on 28 March, the Scottish division, they decided they were being outflanked by the Michael offensive. They abandoned Monchy-le-Preux. And then the Germans did try to attack Arras, but not Vimy. They did a one-day attack on 28 March to try to take Arras and outflank the Vimy Ridge by the south. And they failed miserably. They called off the assault within a day. It only lasted 24 hours, and Arras was saved. And this is the front line. So they went back to basically the 1915 front line, and we're quite proud because the Canadians were not at Monchy. but they had just been pulled out. They had been pulled out of there, and the whole defensive scheme had been designed by the Canadian Corps commander, Arthur Currie. So in a way, he had fingerprints all over this British victory. July 18. You guys know what happened July 18, 1918. Counterattack. The Italians, Americans, British, French, of course, attack on the Marne. What's the name of that battle? Is it the Battle of the Marne 18? Is that what it's called?
Second Battle of the Marne, and that's actually the new battle being covered on the podcast. So first episode was just released yesterday, actually. So
I missed that. Okay,
there, no worries. It's there for you whenever you have time.
Then the Canadians, Australians, and Brits attack at Amiens, a surprise attack. And I'm really proud of my Canadians. The Canadians belonged to First Army at Arras, but they were loaned out twice. Once to Second Army to take Passchendaele, and then they were promptly sent back to First Army. Henry Horn wanted his Canadians back. And then for Amiens, they were sent in secret from Arras to Amiens to attack. And they sent a wireless signal section to Ypres and 2 Canadian battalions to Ypres, and they did a trench raid, and they dropped cap badges and stuff, identifiers. And because it was an omen of an attack if the Canadians were moved from one sector of the front to the other. So they actually did a deception, a little bit like on a grander scale they did for D-Day with Patton. Patton had a fictitious army. They sent the Canadians there, and there's a report of when at the Battle of Amiens, a German said, "You're not supposed to be here. You're in Flanders." So the ruse had worked, and they managed to move 100,000 men and all their equipment, their artillery, in secret to do Amiens. But that's another presentation. The French also took part in the Battle of Amiens. It's called the Battle of Amiens-Montdidier. And then there was the return after the battle started grinding down, and Currie, the Canadian Corps commander, suggested to Haig, we're taking casualties for nothing now. You should widen the attack. So he ordered the Third Army under Byng to attack towards Bapaume. Then in Flanders, I have an arrow there. They ceded some land. I don't remember if it was an actual attack by the British or if the Germans just pulled out, but this was the front line, basically, on August 26, 1918. So we still hadn't recaptured all the land they had lost in March of 18, April. The Marne had gone very well from as far as recovery of terrain, but now they got the idea that they're going to try to outflank the Hindenburg Line. Now the Hindenburg Line goes from La Fère near the 18th Army, if you look at the bottom, and it went all the way up to Arras, to a place called Queant, not far from Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And from Queant to the coalfields of Lens, they put in, because they had lost Vimy Ridge the year before, they put in a switch line called the Drocourt-Queant line. And they wanted to sever that with a surgical strike by the First British Army, Canadian Corps in the lead, and the plan was formulated not by the Army commander, but by the Canadian Corps commander. So they hurried back without rest. They sent the 100,000 men of the Canadian Corps back to Arras to go and take Cambrai. It's a long drawn out way of explaining the context of the liberation of Écourt. So the Canadians attacked here. It was a pinprick, really, because if you compare it to the effort of the Americans, you had 1 million men, I think, at the Meuse-Argonne. This is 100,000 men.
So how many combat troops? It was a relative pinprick. So here we are, morning of August 26, 1918. The front line is at Tilloy-les-Mouflens in front of Arras. The 51st Highland Division was attached to the Canadian Corps. It was on the left flank, the top arrow. It was to attack towards Vitry-en-Artois, on the north side of the Sensee River. 3rd Canadian Division went towards Monchy-le-Preux, 2nd Canadian Division towards Cherisy. Long story short, this was the front line on the morning of September 2nd, 1918. There's Dury, which I talked about before. And I'm going to zoom in. There's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. The black line is the same front line from September 2nd, 1918. There's the Dury Ridge. So we were just kissing the ridge. There's Queant that I mentioned. That's the Drocourt-Queant line that goes into Lens, the coalfields of Lens. And then you get into the Flanders defenses. And this is the top part of the Hindenburg Line. So you can see, if they can punch through at Dury, the Hindenburg Line will be outflanked, and all their armies that are left on the Somme are going to be in danger. So now I have to show you a landmark that's important. It's called Saint-Servin Farm. It was right on the front line. It was captured by the 4th British Division on August 28, 1918. And it would be the jump-off line for the 4th Canadian Division. So we attacked, let me talk about the attack against Dury, September 2nd, 1918. This is the Arras-Cambrai Road. That's the Dury Ridge in the horizon. It's 4 kilometers away. Sorry, I don't know what in miles it is. There's the village of Dury. It's on the ridge, and you can see the green, the forest. And this is Saint-Servin Farm. So we know we're right on the front line. And if there's a lot of cemeteries along this road. There's the Dury Mill Cemetery. You can see that clump of trees. These are all guys that were killed on Mount Dury on September 2nd, 1918. All of them. There's 200 and some odd. All 4th Canadian Division. Very few unknowns. They're all identified. And that's where Dury Mill would have been. There was actually a windmill at the high point of the ridge. And I'm going to refer to that as a marker later on. But, there it is. That's the mill. That was an illicit photograph taken by a Canadian Grenadier Guard after the battle. I say illicit because British weren't allowed to have cameras. I don't know if the Americans did.
No.
And this is a picture. It's supposedly the wires of the Drocourt-Queant line. So between Saint-Servin Farm and Dury Ridge, you would have seen yards and yards and yards and yards of barbed wire. And here I'm jumping ahead. I'm on Dury Ridge, and this is, unfortunately, it's gone. But that's one of the bunkers that a farmer overturned, and I went back last year, and it's gone. But that was a leftover of the Drocourt-Queant line. And that's the village of Ite. Dury village is behind me, and this is the next village north called Ite. And yeah, that would have been hard to bring home, but anyway.
Yeah, Michel, Michiel, and I finally haven't made that mistake. Michiel has spoken about, unfortunately, a lot of French farmers are getting rid of these bunkers, because they're in the way, and they have been for the last century, and they're finally whittling them down. And it's funny, I've encountered at least one place that pops up in my head right away, but it does seem that there's bunkers and stuff that are starting to disappear. Time marches on, sadly, but
well, you see Iterpigny there on the black line.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that lives there, and he just sent me pictures today. And it's got the engineering group regiment that built it signed their name on it, and it's just a couple inches above the ground.
Wow,
probably full of debris. And I have a guy I know, one of my readers, his sister owns a bunker. So he spent 2 years, because for years the farmers would dump crap in them.
Yep.
So he took him 2 years with a bucket to empty it. It was fun to go see. You know, it's one of those things. I'd love to go show it to you, but there's 100 million things to go see in France.
Right.
Yeah, but so on September 2nd, 1918, the 4th British Division attacked towards Étain, which is blotted out by the red line. I showed you a picture of that village. There were 2 brigades of the 4th Canadian Division were attacking Dury and the Dury Ridge, and 2 brigades of the 1st Canadian Division were attacking south of the road. So by 8 o'clock, this is what the front line looked like. And then the 57th British Division of the 3rd Army, there was an army boundary here. They didn't have enough artillery to attack frontally, so they came in behind the Canadians and rolled up the Drocourt-Queant line just shy of Queant. And the Royal Naval Division sent 2 brigades through the gap and encircled Queant, but Queant didn't fall until September 3rd. They got fought to a standstill. And this is the 52nd Lowland Division. They were putting pressure on Queant, but they never got into Queant until the Germans abandoned it. They never captured it. They abandoned it the next day. So that's the front line. And the Drocourt-Queant line is broken, but just barely. But the 1st Division, you see the village of Cagnicourt? I call that the Cagnicourt salient. The Germans on Mount Dury had fought very well, but they were outflanked, and they were in risk of losing. If they're outflanked, they might lose all their guns. They might be in a position. So my friend Norm Christie in his book says the Canadians and the Germans were on Mount Dury. They stared at each other. They had fought each other to a standstill, and the Germans blinked. They decided to pull out. This is the blue line is the Canal du Nord. So the Germans hightailed it. They wanted to go back behind the safety of the canal. And on the left flank, if you notice, nobody's keeping up. There is no left flank. This is just a salient. Right here, you see the blue line? That's a little stream. The Western Front was north-south here instead of, normally it's the east and west. Here it was north-south. And there was at Les Clous, there was all these little marshes. So that became a salient. And here at Marquion, there was the bridge at Marquion. And originally the Canadians had wanted to get to Cambrai. They, at the very least, get across the Canal du Nord, but they failed. They got fought to a standstill. And one of the things they were going to do is send a motorized brigade of British and Canadian armored cars. The Canadian ones were pathetic, these flimsy little armored cars, and they were still using them in 1918. 1 or 2 of them got destroyed, but they couldn't get past Dury. So that's the Marquion Bridge. Anyway, so a brigade of the 4th Canadian Division attacked diagonally across the road here, past Saint-Servain Farm towards the Dury Ridge. Here I am at the foot of the Dury Ridge, and that's where the mill used to be. That's Dury, the village. And this is the 2nd line of the Drocourt-Queant line. That's where it would have been. There would have been a big trench right where that red line is. And the Canadians actually made it to the summit. So they took all the lines of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd line, and then they were stopped. They couldn't go beyond. So this is me just looking to the right of me. There's the Dury Memorial. There's a national memorial there on the Arras-Cambrai Road. That's Dury Mill Cemetery that I showed you previously. And that's the same trench that I showed you in the previous slide. and Canadian troops came up this slope here. This is another brigade of the 4th British Division. I hope I'm not confusing you too much. Are you following it? Now, this road is at the foot of the Dury Ridge. It's parallel to the front line. This is where we came from. That's the water tower at Haucourt near Vis-en-Artois. That's on the jump-off line. That's Saint-Servais Farm. So this is 4 kilometers. So the guys had to slog it 4 kilometers with their packs to assault one of the most important defensive systems on the Western Front. And this is the front line trench. So the road is bracketed by the 2 mainline trenches. And then for some reason, right in front of Dury, they added another double trench system, and right at this spot, it went back down to 2. So they had a lot to do here. And the Canadians came up this way, roughly speaking. They got to the top of the ridge, and they reached the Dury-Villers Road. Now this runs like right on top of the ridge, north-south. That's the Dury Mill.
Okay.
And this is what it looks like today. This is as far as the Canadians got, and there was a very big battle here, a lot of dead to hold the ridge. The Germans used it as a retrenchment or a redoubt, as another line of defense. This is a machine gun pit. There's a number of them on Dury Ridge. It's right in front of the Dury Mill Cemetery. And that's the reserve line, which was on top of Dury Ridge. They built the cemetery right next to the reserve line. So I hope this will help you picture what I just showed you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the road that I was standing on when I took the pictures that parallel to the front line. Or actually, let me start previous. This is the front line trench of the Drocourt-Queant Switch. This is the second line, which is just as powerful. This is the sunken road.
Okay.
And that's where that exact spot is where it says Moulin. The mill was actually there. There's the village of Dury. That's the road I was standing on. Remember I told you the first 2 trenches bracketed the road? I was standing there. And you notice, look, if you look north, they put another loop, sort of like the Dury loop, 2 more trenches in front of Dury, to fortify Dury, I guess. Have you absorbed that?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm on the ridge, on the sunken road, where all these people got killed. All the guys basically in Dury Mill Cemetery were killed right here. That's what's so amazing about, and if you get Norm on to talk about cemeteries, he'll talk your ear off. They're so interesting because they're exactly representative of that day's fighting. They're not, there's different ways of approaching memorializing people. This is the way they chose. And the Canadians fought to keep the original, in 1918, the original burials, where the Australians were more keen on making more American-style cemeteries. It was just a different way of memorializing. But as you can see, it's quite a high ridge. That's Mount Robin, if you remember. It's the next high point beyond the ridge. That's the Marquion Bridge that I told you about. And this is where the armored brigade, the motorized brigade, was supposed to go, and they failed. This is, strangely enough, Dury did not suffer that badly. All the other villages were leveled completely. But this is a photo from 1919. The Canadian Army sent a photographer to take snapshots of all the battlefields, and I wish he had took more. But the pigeon coop you see there is from the 1850s, and it survived. And that's what it looks like today. This is the main road in Dury. And that's my pigeon coop. I love pigeon coops. So there's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. There's the front line at the evening, September 2nd, 1918, after the fighting. And They don't know at this point what's going to happen. Curry, the corps commander, ordered an attack at 5 a.m. the next morning again, and then at the last minute he rescinded the order because the guys had the 4th Division particularly had they lost the 4th Division lost like 850 men killed, just on the Dury Ridge, just one division. That was a lot, and probably 4 to 5,000 wounded. So he told them to stand fast. So there's Dury. There's Dury Mill Cemetery. And there's Mount Robin. And there's a Marquion Bridge. And there's the Hijo del Stream, the creek. And there's the Canal du Nord. So my friend went, I couldn't find the exact spot, but this is Mount Robin in wintertime. And we're looking towards the Dury Ridge from the German side. There's the Dury Memorial. That's how I do my tours. I have to ingrain you all the landmarks so that when I move you around, I go, look, there's the cemetery. So now to get your bearings, there's Dury. So you see it's backwards because we're on the German side.
Mm-hmm.
Dury Mill would have been here. And Dury Mill Cemetery was here. And the Germans, all through September 2nd, 1918, they had an artillery battery here, and they were pounding the Canadians in the sunken road. And that's the Hirondelle Stream, which is important. We will be talking about the civilians again. So there's the front line. There's Dury. I'm repeating myself. The Germans decide to bug out. They drop everything back to the canal. And there was a number 5 squadron observation plane. The 2 guys in an observation plane, and they're flying early in the morning over the front, and they fly down to 100 feet above the village to see if somebody would shoot at them. What kind of a stupid job is that? And they had to find out where, what's going on, right? And then they realized the Germans were gone. So they rushed back, and the pilot got the Distinguished Flying Cross for doing that. He dropped a message at Corps headquarters, and then all of a sudden, the Grenadier Guards specifically, I found in their war diary, they were on Dury Mill. They had been mauled on September 2nd, but they were still at the front line. And they were told at 10 a.m., send out skirmishers. Go as far as you can. Try to make, I don't know what they call it, like you were in the army, to make contact again.
Right.
But the Germans were over the canal. So this is really cool.
They call it develop.
Because of the break.
They call it to develop the enemy?
Pardon me?
Don't they say to develop the enemy?
Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't an all-out offensive. They had canceled that, but it was there was a vacuum, in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where they broke the Drocourt-Queant line. And I have to give a nod to the Australians. On September 1st, they took Mount Saint-Quentin, another Saint-Quentin, on the Somme. And mainly the DQ line, but the Mount Saint-Quentin too, caused the 17th Army. You can see it there, 17th Army. That's who the Canadians were facing. They had to withdraw. But that left the Second Army's right flank open. So the next day, the Second Army. And that left the 18th Army's right flank open. They pulled out. And it went right down to La Fère. All the land lost on the Somme in March was just taken back. The Canadian victory at the DQ line saved thousands of lives. And I contend, I'd like to nail down the facts more, but I even think at Fimes, that was the reason why they were 18th Army, I think the Americans were facing, and they just picked up and left one morning. If I understand the story correctly, because there was all this urban fighting, this hard fighting, and all of a sudden they had to pull out.
Yeah.
So I contend that this was the Canada's most strategically significant victory of the 20th century. But it's not sold that way. But you have to look at the whole context of the battle.
Yeah, interesting point, Michel, because late August of 1918, the Germans counterattacked at Fimes, and they took it all back. And then, within like very early September, just a few days after they had taken it back, they suddenly like just started retreating.
Yeah, 18th Army had to pull out.
Okay.
They made the decision. They weren't defeated, but they wanted to save their army, and it probably had an impact on the Marne as well. But I'm not sure. I don't know that part of the front that well. So Écourt under the bombardment. So now we're back to my main story. So this is the city, the town of Écourt, Clémence-le-Roi. This is what the village looked like after the war, after the bombardment of 1918, and it's been rebuilt. This is the church, the city hall and school. This was repaired. The church lost part of its steeple, a few meters of the steeple, and there's a story behind that, but they were able to rebuild it identical.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is after the war, and back to its previous glory. It was used as a German hospital, and in March 1918, during the Michael offensive, the British decided to bomb Écourt. And there's a whole bunch of like 80 German patients were killed. I think the 28th of March or 27th of March, and a lot of them are in unusually there's a German cemetery nearby, and that you can find their graves there. There's certainly the patients that were killed. And then that's the farm complex I told you about. So now the Germans, when they buggered out. No, they bugged out. I mean, is a correct term. Bugger is a bad word. They bugged out. They took the population with them. They evacuated all the civilians, and they said, take one suitcase, and come out, and we'll pick you up and drive you away. But at Écourt, there was a Mr. Bury, and his daughter Emilienne said, I'm not leaving. He stayed in his house on the Rue du Préau. And 43 to 46, we're not sure how many exactly, preferred to weather the bombardment. And Mr. Lechevin, he was a town councillor, and ironically, Lechevin means alderman, but that was his name. He owned the complex of the farm there. Like us North Americans, the farms are usually out in the country, but often in France, at least in the north, I noticed a lot of farm buildings are actually in the town, right? And between the villages, there's no population at all. Everybody, so they went and hid, and that's the Hirondelle stream. I keep talking about it. So exploitation to the Canal du Nord, September 3rd, 1918. So this is the front line morning, September 3rd, 1918. We had just got a horrible battle. So I said the British sent reconnaissance into Étain, captured it without a fight. The Canadians went to Récourt, captured it without a fight. The 46th Canadians from Saskatchewan, they went to Sandpit Hill and took the high ground there. Where at the end of the arrow, there's a piece of high ground right there. There it is, Sand Hill. And the 87th Canadian Grenadier Guards went and swooped into Sodemo. Found nobody there. All these villages were vacated. So this is the approach to Sodemo after the war, and this is what it looks like now. But it's all pretty now. And what's interesting about Sodemo is this is a 12th. I think it's a 12th century steeple, and it's the only medieval steeple anywhere in the area, because everything had been destroyed. So one day I'm going to go. I was invited to go see it. But this is during the occupation, because you can see the whitewashed signs on the fences there. So that's what it looks like today. Anyway, so then the Grenadier Guards, it's like a knife through butter. So they got through Sodemo really quickly. Nobody there. I'm assuming they let moppers up in, probably the guys to mop up the village in case there was somebody there. And halfway to Écourt-Saint-Quentin, artillery shell falls and kills Lieutenant Albert Lloyd of the Grenadier Guards from Montreal. And he's the only guy killed in the liberation of Écourt-Saint-Quentin, which is unusual for the Great War. This is a relatively happy story for the Great War. And this is it. That's the church in Sodemo. And this is the field between Sodemo and Écourt. And these places are so idyllic, as you know, Mike. There's idyllic places to visit today. And what I love about this part of France is there's absolutely no tourists. You have lunch at the Grand Place in Arras. There's no, at 11:45, tour buses coming in and dumping off tourists and hogging all the tables. There's no tourists. I just absolutely love going there. So anyway, they advanced through this field, and Lloyd would have been killed somewhere where the horses were, roughly.
Okay.
And the only picture I found of him is in the newspaper. Unfortunately, he had one son, and the son died in the 80s with no children. So I was hoping I could find a little more about him. But anyway, so they get into Écourt-Saint-Quentin, and they meet the civilians. And I know I found a book that was written where Mr. Lechevin wrote a chapter, and he talks about the trials and tribulations of the liberation of Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And he said, we were sending people up regularly to poke a head out to see what was going on. Because the Germans had told them, you're crazy to stay here. You're going to get killed, because the British were bombing the town. And they would pop up to see, is anybody coming? You know, it was probably very tense. So this is Cemetery Street. The cemetery is on the right. That building, the wall you see there, that's the limit of the cemetery. And this is the farm complex. And there's Mr. Lechevin. He, in that book, I got his picture. He's featured in the book. And this is the Abbey. And this is a massively built structure. It's now a multi-unit apartment building.
Okay.
There was 3 parts. The cellar is in 3 naves, I guess, or I don't know. And one of them was not rented out, was not occupied. So we got to go in it. And now you see why they hid here from the bombardment. And this is my publisher and my man in Écourt, the historian in Écourt, and my publisher. He came all the way from Verdun to see this. Not from Verdun, from the Somme, from Normandy.
Oh, wow. That's quite a drive. Okay.
To see this. But it was really something. I don't know if I'd ever have access to it again now, but I got the pictures to prove it. So you can imagine they were hiding down here. So there's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. There's the farm. But there was some 4 military age young men. 3 of them decided that they were going to risk the bombardment and try to head towards the invading Allies. So they came out of the farm and they followed the stream. You see the blue line? They get to the culvert. They went down the road and they get to the culvert, which still exists. There we go. There's the farm there, that big farm. You saw the church. They came down this road here and reached the culvert. Now, one of them was scared, apparently. And this I got as oral history from the 2 kids of the guys. One hid in the culvert. And the other 2 didn't go in. You see Rumocourt? The kid said they didn't go in Rumocourt. They stayed out. Maybe they thought it'd be less chance of getting hit by shells, but they followed the valley along the valley along the Dead Valley. So there's the culvert. So they went between Sodemo and Rumocourt.
Okay.
But here we have from the 4th Canadian Division, the 54th Battalion Canadians had a platoon going in the direction of the arrow, and they intercepted them on the edge of Rumocourt. So what the children told me about their dad checked out. And they report that they only intercepted 2, but 3 had left. Three young men had left. They all survived, but only 2 got picked up by the 54th Battalion. Right here. Well, as close as I can get it. Mm-hmm. So there's Rumocourt. The 2 French young men were equipped with gas masks too. The Germans had given them gas masks, And the 54th Battalion was coming here. So somewhere on the edge of town, they picked them up. And what's amazing is I found a picture of the commander of the platoon, Lieutenant Werner Tobias, 54th Battalion. And they reported in, because we have access to the war diaries, and he gives a report that he found this guy. And that's them. And this, I think, is near Vis-en-Artois, between Vis-en-Artois and Cherisy, it looks like a trench probably near the Arras-Cambrai Road. You can see there's 2 civilians there, and I was going to get to know them. And there's another shot of them here. And I found out this was Gustave Barbier, and this is Noël Lagrange. Gustave Barbier and Noël Lagrange were lifelong friends. One guy's daughter, one had a daughter, the other one had a boy, and the couple got married.
Oh, how about that?
1945.
That's so cool.
And guess who I went to see?
Ah, how about that?
Charles Barbier and Berthe Lagrange. She just died. She died at 100.
Wow.
2 years ago. And I was better looking then. But I got to meet them. But it's the only time. Oral history, family history is always a starting point, but it's usually full of errors. Everything they told me checked out. The story that they've been passing along. And, had I not gone in there, it would have gotten lost. This remarkable story would have been lost. Then she says, come into the bedroom. I want to show you something. And then hairs went up on the back of my neck. This old photograph of their parents that I got from the National Archives, a copy. This is an original. It's been there since 1945. As you know, the French never move, right? They have a house in 45, and it doesn't matter how much money they have. They're in the same house, till they die. And I hope somebody did something with this, because I would have loved to have had it.
Oh, man.
But somebody knew enough there was obviously communication that was kept, because somebody knew enough to send them a copy of this.
Yeah.
It was astounding. See, that's my copy.
How about that?
That's not what she wanted to show me, and I didn't care about what she was showing me. Something, and with old people, they want to show you their knitting or something, and that's fine. It's part of interviewing, right? But then, so then, there's these guys, and there they are with the Canadians, and they're here. There's 1,
Oh.
2,
Oh.
and 3.
Oh, how about that?
It all ties together.
Yeah.
Léonce Doissy, that was his name, the third man. He didn't have any family extant in town, but
Okay.
I hit gold when I found the 2 guys, their kids got married.
Wow, amazing.
It is amazing. I
Wow.
told you, it's a complicated story. So now, 1st Canadian Division exploits as well. The 87th Canadian Grenadier Guards barely mention the civilians in their war diary. They were in a hurry. Their job was not to look after civilians. It was to get to the canal. So they pushed out in the direction of Palouel. Can you see Palouel up there in the top corner?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So then the 46th, remember they were on Sandpit Hill. They squeezed out the Canadian Grenadier Guards. There were too many units in the front.
Mm-hmm.
So they side-slipped and took responsibility for Écourt-Saint-Quentin and Palouel. And then that's where I got the war diary they had time to talk about. They brought in the French liaison to the Canadian Army as interpreter, and he gave a report. Unfortunately, he wrote it in French, but the war diary records it in English, so I retranslated it back to French.
Okay.
And they talk about the civilians and what they had done and stuff like that. You'd have to read my book. So this was the front line on the night of September 3rd, 1918. But then, just as a side story, and it ties into the civilians, Paluel, they decide the 46th Battalion was just north of Écourt-Saint-Quentin, and they tell George Kentner, who was, I think, a lance corporal at the time, to take his section and probe and see if he could take Paluel. And in his memoir that he wrote in 1919, he's pissed off. He said, what's a section going to do? We're going to get killed. And they did take casualties. So that's where the 46th were. They had to sideslip and look. They were now responsible for Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And this is, I tweaked some stuff and it's repetitive. This is where Kentner was with the 46th. He was told to go to Paluel. So he went down Rue du Préau, and I know that for a fact. And then he went to the causeway, to the causeway. Like there's a causeway there, and there's a causeway. But here on Rue du Préau, he saw an old man and a young girl as he walked by. And it has to be Mr. Bury and his daughter Emilienne. They were the only ones that weren't in the cellar. They lived on Rue du Préau, and the house still exists, and I put it in the wrong order, but it's just a mundane house. But that proves that Kentner went down Rue du Préau Street, then turned left towards Paluel.
Wow.
Oh, there's this, that's the house on Rue du Préau.
Okay.
And he was standing in front of the house with his, like, this is another unrelated source. And I add Kentner to this story because it's part of the story of the civilians. Everything I touched checked out. I've never had a project go as well as this. And this is where Kentner got. That's as far as he got. There's water on both sides. This is a causeway. He took some casualties. He was really angry about that, and he went back. And Paluel actually fell to the London Division on 27 or 28 September 1918 at the Battle of Hindenburg Line. I think it was the 28th of September. It was the 56th London Division. We're here, and they took it then. So to Arras, we're not done yet. Remember, I promised you I would go to the Hindenburg Line and back again. So there's Écourt-Saint-Quentin. The civilians, I know for a fact, walked back, or they rode on artillery pieces or something. And I know they went this way for two reasons. They reached the sand pit. So we know for a fact artillerymen saw them at the sand pit. I'll have a picture of that. And on Mount Robin, a Canadian artilleryman named Kerr appropriated the battery position. It was high ground, and he set up his artillery up there. And in his memoir, he said, I could see on the horizon these civilians leaving Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And that's what he saw. He was standing here, and he saw them go across his, where I'm pointing, that clump of trees, I don't know if I have a marker for that. Yes, there's the sand pit where there's trees are. There were other artillerymen there, and I looked in their war diary, and they said, oh, these civilians came by on their way to, well, they didn't say on the way to Arras, but they walked by. So I know they went this way. And this is the sand pit that came down this sunken road, and where that brush is the sand pit where the artillerymen saw it. Then more artillerymen, or I think it was more artillerymen right here. Civilians were coming up the road, and they mentioned, it was such a novel sight, I think, that they mentioned it. Hey, these civilians came. And just so you know where you are, that's Dury Mill Cemetery. This is what I told you I do on tours. I always make you memorize the points. That way I can explain the battle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Dury. So they came down this way. And then there was a field hospital here at Haucourt, right next to there's a big cemetery in Vis-en-Artois. You probably went to it when you stayed there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right there, they had overnight, they had brought in light gauge railway to that point. And they were able to take the wounded back to Arras from then on. It was incredible what the railway troops were doing. Overnight, they would put 4 kilometers of rail in.
Wow.
They were actually Canadians. We had a big railway corps. But I love infrastructure. I study infrastructure. I'm in construction. I'm a marvel that you would be able in 1918 to be able to be that productive.
Right.
So anyway, and if you notice at the cemetery there, if you've been there, a lot of guys there died of wounds. Like they would have been brought to this collecting post and would have been found to be dead, and they'd be buried right there. So they were certainly seen here because the history of the medical corps said, "Oh, we treated civilians here." So it had to have been. That's why I thought this must be the first time it happened. Because I know at Amiens, and earlier in August, they had there was a contingency plan of what to do if we find civilians. But nowhere do they mention ever coming here. The civilians were all gone by the time they went. So this really was kind of, it's not a war-winning story, but it's a really kind of a nice anecdotal story.
Yeah.
So this is about where they would have been at the field hospital near Saint-Servais Farm. And the cemetery would be on the left there. Then in Livesay, the book from the beginning, this is General Morrison, commander of the Canadian Corps Artillery. And they must have gone through Canadian Corps headquarters, which I believe was in a sunken road near Walcourt. Which is between Vis-en-Artois and Arras.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna know this area as good as me soon. But she says, "You are our saviors," and she gave him a kiss. And there's a lady who just published his memoir, and I don't have it, but I said, "Does he mention meeting civilians?" That would have been the cherry on top. And she says he doesn't mention it, but it's almost certainly a true story. So then, now we get back to Arras. They've had their inspection, medical inspection. This is probably the September 4th, 1918. They're loading them back into trucks to, I thought, points unknown. But in talking not that long ago with the historian, he thought that the story was that they had nowhere to put these people, so they just sent them back to Écourt-Saint-Quentin, where they had their own billets. And there's the commemoration. I wrote a book, and from the time I started researching to it was only like 3 months between research, editing, publishing. I had it out on time for November 11, I think 2008. It was, some people say I spent 10 years writing a book. No, I could not have asked. It was almost like somebody bought me a puzzle, a children's puzzle, and all the pieces, none of the pieces were missing. This is the best example. And it was 2010. I'm sorry, 2010. I was invited to Remembrance Day, and I had my book launch in the village. And this is the typical war memorial.
Mm-hmm.
And they did something nice. They put a plaque up for Albert Lloyd, who was killed in action at Écourt-Saint-Quentin, 3 September 1918, age 24, during the battle for the liberation of the village. And I suggested that they put a plaque up to the civilians, but I guess I wasn't persuasive enough. Now, I use sources from 3 countries. I read, I don't know how many war diaries, memoirs, an unpublished memoir, French magazines, Canadian magazines, the New York Times. I've never seen a project with so many loose ends unrelated, completely unrelated pieces of evidence to gel the story. Now, I know a story this complex, you'd have to ask, well, did I get it right? But I'm going to have a moment of ego and say, I think I got it almost 100% right. I think that's exactly what happened. And that's my presentation for today.
Wow, Michel.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Wow.
seriously, what a story! Like this is like, I mean, it's like you've been saying. First off, first thoughts is this is one of the few happy World War I stories. I joke around with people like usually everybody dies in the end, but this is definitely not the case. This is, and this is a whole other. First off, for a lot of American listeners, it's this is a different part of the front line, that one that doesn't often get talked about unless you're pretty deep into the war, and then just this aspect of like the civilians, like they were there too. So Michel, this is incredible work. You're going down the rabbit hole, as they say, going into the cellar, and parsing out everybody and particularly finding what are the two men's names? Is Monsieur Lagrange?
Barbier, Doissy, Léonce Doissy and Gustave Barbier.
Man, and then also like meeting their children who were married. Like what? Wow! Like what? Oh my God, man! What a story! This is.
I got really lucky. I have so much respect for the story and for the French people that did this, and I was so fortunate that people helped me, and I had to make my own luck sometimes, but there was a lot of luck. But it's my worst performing book.
Is it really?
Yeah, it was remaindered. Like there was 500 copies left, and they remaindered them. And you know how I felt about my first book. I didn't like it at all, and it's a bestseller. And this one, and the publisher said we chose people he thought it was just a local village history.
Oh,
but it was really, and that's what they told me. In what was I went to two publishers in France, Pen and Sword, and
right.
And so it's too specific. Again, it's too much about like the history of one village.
Oh,
But it's more than that. And that's kind of why I did this DVD number 2 behind the scenes thing. I could do a whole book just based on this presentation. Well, actually, I could take the transcript and there it is, right?
Right. Right.
But it's very seldom a historian gets this lucky.
Yeah. Now, Michel, okay, how can I put this? Speaking as an unpublished author, who remains unpublished because, frankly, he has yet to write a book and put in the effort. What does it mean that this book was remaindered? Were the remaining copies, were they taken back?
When you remainder a book, is usually you marker the side of it, and then dealers will buy by the pound.
I see.
Books, and then they go in bargain bins, like at Walmart or at.
Okay.
That's called remainder. So they sold them for like €2 or €3.
I see. I see. I see.
So when you get remainders, because you no hope of selling at full price.
Gotcha. Understood. That's so unfortunate, because like what a story. Really, like what a story. Also, like the Germans, the fact that they had at least some minimal care about the civilians, of like wanting to evacuate them, and to the point of like even giving those men the gas masks.
Well, I presume they issued them because they had them. They must have I don't think they stole them.
That probably would have been pretty dangerous to be caught with that, I would imagine, by German authorities.
So I think they issued them with gas masks. maybe out of
Interesting.
humanity or something.
I read actually down in the Second Marne battlefield where a village was being bombarded by the Allies. An old French woman was in a basement. She came out, and a German sergeant major saw her and like escorted her onto a truck and told the driver, like,
Really?
get this woman out of here. And so it's not typically what we hear about the Germans, but I have heard this before, so it's just really interesting. So really, what a story, Michel. What a story. I've been sitting here riveted.
Well, I told you I needed an hour and a half, and I don't know what I would cut out. It could be crime to cut anything out. I could cut George Kentner out, but he's again, it's one of those things. He says, well, I saw this old man and a young woman, and then the guy said, well, Mr. Bury and Emilienne, they live on the Rue du Préau, and they didn't want to go in the cellar. They were staying in their house. And then Kentner got orders to go to Parduel. So if he went by Rue du Préau, he would, like he says, I saw an old man, and it's got to be, it's called multiple attestation. Right? It's gold. The whole thing is gold. Yeah.
Super cool. Super cool.
The story, I mean, like the whole story is gold. And I'm sorry it never got published in English. But I think it would have been interesting. It's such a happy story.
Seriously, and we will do what we can here to spread it. I think the best way to present this, Michel, is to keep it in video form. So this will go up on the YouTube channel, and then I will do my best to spread the word as much as I can and share it as much as I can. Yeah. So Michiel, Eric, any questions for Michel?
No questions, just absolutely amazing. I mean, what a story.
Right?
I would not
I don't know how to stop sharing.
Oh, it's worth every minute you give to it. It's fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Yes, me too.
Up on YouTube.
Yeah, I'll post it on every medium that I've got, so we can get the word out. This is such a cool story, and I mean, a forgotten corner of France, but this is definitely something that needs to be shared. And honestly, even particularly now, like right around Christmas time, this is a feel good story. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and you have to know the battlefield. You have to know where the hills are. You know that. You have to know the geography, the context of the war. I spend a lot of time explaining the context. Maybe I could cut down on that, but it's because I'm explaining why was this the first time. And there's a famous when they went into Luz in 1915, there was a heroine that was there and helped. So they found civilians there. And I know for a fact in 1917 at the Battle of Cambrai, they got into a village that had some people, and they actually evacuated, but the Germans came back and retook the town. So the Western Front opened up for a moment, and the door slammed shut on them. Okay. And then in 1918, they were on the defensive the whole first half. And in the second half, they didn't reach the green fields of occupied France, the fields from 1914, until they hit Vis-en-Artois, until they went into Écourt. So I contend in my book, I think this is the definitive. What did I say in my blurb? The definitive liberation of France began at Écourt-Saint-Quentin. And then people wonder, why do I stick on the same battlefield? You can't have this kind of in-depth research if you're all over the place.
Well, one thing, a couple of things. Just as far as you being unable to take details out of this story, if I could have a tagline for the podcast, it would be, we love the details, so like you can feel free to go like as deep as you want. I love it. And I think a lot of the podcast listeners like it too. Like like we get real nerdy here and go really deep. And I'm always impressed by how, your world is the Arras-Cambrai Road. And like you said, like you haven't yet like told all of the stories there, and it just reminds me of a gentleman who once asked me about the podcast, like, you know, like, oh, World War One, is there a lot to talk about there? And I'm like, oh my guy, like we're never gonna get close to the end. You know, I'm never gonna scratch the surface. And here you are, like you would think, right? Michel, you've been studying this one road, you know, and all of the events around it here for decades at this point, and like you still have stories to tell. So what an amazing
I'm just sorry I screwed up some of my slides again. I always want it to be perfect. I always think, well, this will be the definitive version of my presentation. And then, you know,
this has been
one thing that helped is I added chapter sections, and that helped me for my narrative because I don't have any notes.
Yeah. Well, no worries. Well, I do have to say.
No, just it's.
Go ahead.
I want to tell. Well, it's a story about a Canadian battalion that sweeps into town and they find civilians in a basement. That's the world's simplest story.
Yes,
but this DVD number 2 behind the scenes, like it's a monumental amount of data to explain that one simple moment. Right?
It's really a detective story. It's the story of you putting it together. That's the incredible part. It's what you did. Yeah, they took a simple story and you've made it fantastically interesting.
Yeah, it's movie length.
Yeah. I like
movie
it.
length.
I like
but
it.
I don't have anything more. I always hope to be some more pictures or something, and it's like I've moved on to other things, you know.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed that and all the detail.
Yeah, Michel,
well,
thank
if you want detail, there's detail.
Yeah, and I apologize, folks. I do need to get going.
Yeah, me too.
Dinner is being served. Michel, thank you so much. Eric, pleasure to meet you. Michiel, so good to see you again, my friend. And stay tuned. I will. We're going to get this edited, and then we're going to get it out and share it as widely as we can.